Hey guys, it's CS Joseph with csjoseph.life doing another episode on explaining the different behaviors of the temperaments, as well as explaining the different behaviors of the interaction styles according to Dr. Linda Behrens. We're doing this to help people figure out how to better use the type grid for typing themselves and others, that's why this lecture series will be added to that playlist, How to Type Yourself and Others, which I recommend you do, which means it'll probably be 18 lectures long, and then this also will have its own playlist. Before I begin on tonight's lecture, which is Season 15, Episode 3, before I do that, I just want to remind you all that we are doing a giveaway. If you want a copy of Dr. Robert Glover's book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, which I think everyone and their mother should read, just subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, leave a like and a comment, and you'll be entered to win. The next time that I will be doing a whiteboard lecture, the name of the winner will be written on the whiteboard, and I will announce it as well. So just something for you to be aware of as we continue to grow this channel. And yeah, so that's this round for this giveaway, and then we're going to have other giveaways coming up as well, including a free coaching session with me in the very near future. So anyway, we've been talking about informative versus direct. That was yesterday's lecture, and today's lecture, although yes, I'm sure someone's noticing that, I'm wearing the same shirt as yesterday. Actually, I own many of the same shirt because I'm an ENTP. I mean, sue me, I wear the same thing every day just like Steve Jobs, right? So if I like something, I just buy many of it and then wear many of it because it's convenient for me and I don't have to do that as much. But every now and then an ESTJ or an ESFJ would catch me doing that and then give me a bunch of crap about it, and then I'll start doing that less. What can I say? So today we're going to be discussing the difference between initiating versus responding. What does that mean? What does it mean to be initiating versus responding? This is particularly important. I mean, in as much as informative versus direct is important, but also it's really important to understand the difference between initiating versus responding. So why? Well, from an interaction style standpoint, from the perspective of Dr. Linda Behrens, you need to understand if a type is initiating or responding. And this allows you to determine whether or not somebody is a structure type, aka in charge, or someone is get things going, aka starter, or if someone is chart the course, also known as a finisher, or if they're a background / behind the scenes type, right? How is that possible? How does that make sense? It's because the starters and the structure types at the top, they're extroverts. They're also initiating because they're extroverts. And the introverts are the responding types, which are the finishers and the background, also known as behind the scenes types. I know there's like tons of different terminology with all this, but kind of have to say it because there's so many different interpretations, mostly because people are trying to like not get sued. So then they try to relabel everything because they're afraid of getting sued, right? Well, luckily someone like me as an autodidact can spend time reading about all this crap, and then I'm just like, yeah, this person said this and they get credit for it, instead of me just trying to take credit for everything like a jackass, right? Anyway, that's not the point, neither here nor there. Initiating versus responding. So it really is the difference between introversion and extroversion, quite frankly, but we'll also look at a specific example. But let's talk about introversion versus extroversion. What is introversion? Introversion is when an individual requires solitude to recharge their mental energy, right? Extroversion is when someone requires being around fellow human beings, preferably more than two human beings at a time, to gather their mental energy and recharge their batteries, their mental batteries, basically. So that's the loose definition of introversion versus extroversion. And I don't say extroversion, I say extraversion because that's the original term coined by Carl Jung. That was the original term. And I don't care about how the dictionary or Webster or whoever decided that it should be extroversion. I really don't care, and I don't give a damn. What I do care about is trying to be as accurate as possible to the original Jungian way of doing it, which is why I say extraversion, because his point is that people need something a little bit extra, right? And the extra thing that they need is other human beings being around them, interacting with fellow human beings, preferably in a group setting, so that they can gain, their mind can gain the mental energy that they need in order to stay productive, in order for them to continue on what they're doing, for them not to be depressed, for example. It's because they need to be around fellow human beings, right? Which is kind of interesting because I'm an ENTP and I'm like the most introverted of all of the extroverted types, because I have an ISFJ subconscious, which means I can be pretty behind the scenes sometimes. And even in a social situation, until someone makes me feel comfortable in said social situation, unless I'm the one putting on said social situation, I'm usually actually very behind the scenes in those social situations, even though at the same time, hypocritically speaking, my mind is also gaining mental energy from that situation. It's really weird how that works. So anyway, the point is that there's a lot of different dichotomies and macrocosms and microcosms when it comes to the 16 types and the cognitive functions. So thank God we have Linda Behrens, who talks about the interaction styles and her interpretation of the temperaments, because it's way closer to the original temperament creator, which is the like, it's Plato. I mean, I don't care for accuracy, and we all know that, right? So Plato's approach to the temperaments. But we're not talking about temperaments today, we're talking about interaction styles. So initiating versus responding. So an introvert requires solitude to gain mental energy. And you see this all the time, like when you see an INTP woman go to church, for example, with their family, and then they just need to be left alone to play games on their phone in a corner, right? They're gaining mental energy because they're just so burned out from the church experience. Or they leave early from church, for example, or whatever group setting that it is. It's because they're introverted, right? And they need to be able to have that solitude in order for them to have that mental energy in their life, right? So, but another way of looking at introversion versus extroversion is that introversion is still counts in certain situations. If you're by yourself, it's an introverted situation. If you are by yourself plus one human being, that's still technically an introverted situation. It's when you get three or more, aka three is a crowd, two to tango. In a two to tango situation, it's technically still an introverted situation. And the way that a person's mind is gaining, an introvert can still gain mental energy in a one-on-one situation, but they can't do it in a three's a crowd situation. Conversely, even an extrovert, when they're in a one-on-one situation, their mind is still liable for losing energy, and they need to go extrovert and be with a group of people. Now, it just also depends on how well developed their other introverted sides their mind is, because for a while that can sustain them one-on-one interaction. It's just that they're not drained as quickly, because at least there's at least one human being that they're around, right? But it still can be very draining to them. So just remember that's a way to classify extroversion versus introversion, because extroversion is three's a crowd, two to tango or less, one person solely. That counts as introversion. So both, so that's just another way to understand it. And the final way of understanding introversion versus extroversion is being initiating versus responding, which is the actual metric that we're utilizing in understanding and using the type grid for typing yourself or other people, right? This is important. And being initiating with somebody means that you're going to go up to someone, you're going to initiate a conversation with them. Maybe it's because you want to know something, maybe you're missing some information and whatnot. Maybe maybe you're just trying to find out some information. Maybe they know something, maybe you're lost or whatever, but you're not afraid or not concerned about it. You're not going to rely on signs. It's more useful to you to just go up to somebody and ask them for directions, right? If we're going to be using the example for directions. An introvert, sometimes they're in a place they've never been before. It would be more useful to them if there was signs, and they're hoping secretly inside of themselves, oh, I sure hope there's a sign that tells me where I can go so I don't have to initiate with somebody, right? It's kind of interesting how that works. Well, that's actually pretty normal. That's actually pretty normal for introverts to do that in that situation of trying to find directions. But an initiator, an extrovert, that's not going to bother them. They're going to initiate with a complete stranger and get the information they need. Now, that's not to say that introverts are not going to initiate with a complete stranger, but it's outside their comfort zone, right? They'll do what needs to be done just as much as any human being would do what needs to be done, but at the end of the day, it still causes their mind more stress to initiate because they're using their subconscious or their unconscious to initiate in that situation, not their ego. Remember, a person's ego is where they are, most of all. So let's take an actual practical example of what it is to be responding. Let's talk about INTJs, right? So INTJs, they are introverted. I have an INTJ friend. He would get so butthurt or upset if I never kept him in the loop about things. And if he's always looking for, whether or not, I told him information as soon as I knew, right? Or if I took a long time to tell him things, because he's always expecting me to inform him of things and keep him up to speed, right? Because he's responding and he wants to know that I think highly enough of him and that he is important enough to me that I would at least keep him informed about new developments or things that are happening so that, he doesn't feel left out, because SE users, they don't like feeling left out. Especially, when you're in a friendship situation and the INJ's like, hey, don't leave me out. I don't want to miss this opportunity or miss this experience that you're going to have. Keep me informed. Let me know about it so that I understand everything there is to know about it, etc. And okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense. But they're being responding because the INTJ prefers me to basically go to them and give them the information that they need to keep them informed, right? An extrovert, however, if he was an ENTJ and he wanted to know what was going on, he just straight up open up a conversation with me in Discord or call me and just be like, hey, what do you know about this? And then I'd tell them. And then I'm put in the situation of the responder, right? In that situation, I would respond with my INTJ unconscious, also known as the shadow, or I would respond with my ISFJ subconscious. And then through responding, the ENTJ would become informed in that situation. And they're not afraid to initiate with me or take the initiative in that regard, right? So do you guys see the difference? People prefer to interact. Now, it's not to say that introverts can't initiate. It's just that they prefer to respond. It's not to say that extroverts can't respond. It's just that they prefer to initiate. It's primary versus secondary, right? So if you're trying to classify someone, you classify them by their ego, right? When you're looking at the type grid, you're looking at them from the perspective of the ego, okay? Because just treat all of those things in the type grid as egos, and you're trying to identify their ego, which means that's where they mentally are, primarily speaking. The majority of the time, say 70% of the time during a day. That's very arbitrary, but I'm just using it as an example, right? Of course, more integrated the person, the less they'd be in their ego and more comfortable in their subconscious or unconscious, maybe even potentially there's super ego for super integrated people, super mature, super wise people, but those are very rare, right? But initiating is very interesting. They take the initiative, whereas the responding, they're able to take the initiative sometimes, but they prefer to respond. Going back to the INTJ, when they're working on a class project and there's a class team, they prefer their teammates to keep them informed about happenings with their project and what's going on with the project for their school. Maybe it's their capstone project or final project. They would generally expect that their teammates would keep them informed, and they would get mad if their teammates started making decisions without involving them, because they've taken the INTJ's opportunity to respond away, and they feel very disrespected by that. And that is a problem, right? Because it's like, whoa, why did you all make this decision without me? You're so disrespecting me right now. I'm obviously not important here. You know what I mean? But if he was an ENTJ, it wouldn't matter. He'd just be like, hey, what decisions are you making? Constantly making sure that the ENTJ is in the loop instead of hoping or expecting other people to loop them in, right? That's the difference between initiating and responding. And if you are initiating, you're an extrovert. If you are responding, you're an introvert. So you can look at it either way. If you don't know if they're initiating or responding, see if they are obviously introverted or extroverted. If you don't know if they're introverted or extroverted, see if they're initiating or responding. Either way, you will get the answer. Either way, you will find out. And here's the best part. Once you identify they're initiating, you've just eliminated half of the types. You've eliminated finishers and background. Okay, this guy's initiating. That means he's either structure or he is starter. So you have 8 types to work with. And we talked about direct versus informative yesterday. And say for the sake of this example, oh wow, he's direct. Okay, now we know he's direct. So then we've just eliminated 4 more types. So we know that he's direct and we know he's initiating. So he's automatically a structure type, right? So because he's a structure type, he's either an ESTJ, an ESTP, an ENTJ, or an ENFJ, right? One of those 4 types. And then after that, you just have to identify his temperament, and you know exactly which one of those 4 types he is. So for the sake of this example, we know he's an NT because he's an ENTJ, so ENTJ is the answer, right? But we'll talk more in a couple lectures deeper in this particular lecture series as to how to tell the difference, between NF, NT, SP, or SJ for the temperament. There are specific additional dimensions and tools that you can use to determine that. But for the sake of this lecture, we're just focusing on initiating versus responding. So a lot of it can be said about comfort level. Some people just prefer to interact with other human beings. And again, it's just all preference. This is all preference. Interaction styles, as much as temperaments, is all about preference. And it's like, okay, do you prefer to initiate? Do you prefer to respond? Doesn't mean that you can't initiate. Doesn't mean that you can't respond. It's just what you prefer to do. That's the difference. That's literally the difference. It's all about preference, right? Like I'm right-handed, so I prefer to use my right hand, even though technically I'm not. I'm actually left-handed, although I do a lot of things with my right hand, so I'm not ambidextrous unlike the other one where I can use, like, each hand has its own, assigned task that it does. Okay, yes, nice INTJs right now are snickering when I said that. Great, guys. Real mature, right? Anyway. So, with that being said, initiating versus responding. Initiating means you're an extrovert. Responding means you're an introvert. It's making sure that you're looped in. That's initiating. Hoping that others or hoping that others loop you in instead of you making sure that you're looped in, primarily speaking, then you're responding, because you would rather have people come to you instead of you going to other people, right? It's the difference between desiring to ask a human being for directions, talking to one of the locals or the natives about, hey, where can I find this thing, versus hoping that there's a road sign that you could read so you could figure it out on your own without having to initiate with somebody you don't know, right? That's the difference between initiating versus responding. So anyway, that finishes up this lecture, Season 15, Episode 3, for the behaviors of interaction styles versus temperaments. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, insightful, and however many other adjectives we could shove into that, please subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and also on the podcast. If you have any questions about any of this material, leave it in the comments section and I'll do my best to answer. And also leave a like, because I like likes. Likes are dope. They are the dopest. Also, if you have not joined the Discord server yet, join the Discord server. We'll be doing live Q&A, and I've been actually pretty active on it, answering questions pretty well recently, so that's kind of cool to see that the community is growing. We're about to break 300 people in the community, which is awesome, the Discord community, that is. And I'll actually be doing probably some giveaways as well during the actual Q&A sessions through the Discord, so if you want to get in on that, definitely get on the Discord. And if you haven't joined our meetup group because you're in the Bay Area or want to be in the Bay Area meetup group, also join that too. Both links to the meetup and the Discord are in the description of this lecture. So, awesome. And don't forget our giveaway. Remember, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, leave a like. You'll be automatically entered in for this round of the giveaway, which is No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. And then eventually we're probably going to be giving away a bunch of Linda Barron's books as well. So, awesome. Got a big day ahead of me tomorrow, so I don't know if I'll be back tomorrow night or not, but if I am, great. So, I'll see you then.